Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Talos of Tech live on Twitch. It feels good to say that again. I missed you guys last week. I did. Although at the same time, I will admit I had a great time. It was nice to be away and in a different place for a little while. Been stuck in this house for so long. But it also feels great to be back. I think that's why we leave the house, so that we can come back and enjoy it all over again. But yeah, I got to walk by the beach, of course, with my mask on. I got to explore new places. I got to visit people, some of which are in the chat. Hello, welcome, thank you, Mac XDMG, for the Twitch Prime as well. Shout out to Mike for letting me crash at his place for a while. It's good to be back. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Scott, for the Twitch Prime. We missed you too, Drew. Have a sub. Thank you for 25 months. Holy cow. Cow, sorry, is what I meant to say. I finished like 3 TV shows on this trip. Because at the condo we were staying at, no people were there. It was a family member who has a condo near the ocean, but they weren't staying there. They hadn't been there for months, so they let us stay there for our anniversary trip, and we had it all to ourselves, which was nice because it's kind of big and it's got a lot of room. And they had Netflix on their TV, so I got to get caught up on all these shows that I haven't been able to watch because we don't have Netflix. So we finished The Good Place. We finished I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, so I'm just going to say Craps Creek, but they don't say crap, obviously. Something Creek. I finished that show. Very good. And I also finished Long Way Up as we just got back. But anyway, thank you all for tuning in. I have so many thoughts on the M1 chip, and boy, I know I've made some videos that have aged poorly in the past, but my M1 chip recap video after the event, that did not age well. I mean, for one, I was in a hurry. I was not filming at home. I was filming at Randy's place, and I was using a computer I was not comfortable with. I was recording with a camera and a mic I wasn't comfortable with. So my thoughts did not get to brew as well as they do here, where I kind of know how everything works. I love Something Creek. Good show. David? Dawson's Creek? No, it's not Dawson's Creek. I love doing the impressions on that show. You just write it off. I can't believe we got an M1 chip with only 2 ports, though. It's not acceptable. Moira, I was asking for 3 or 4 at least USB-C ports. Why do we keep the headphone jack but start removing USB-C ports? I don't know. Thank you. Bites and Coffee said it in the chat. I'm not going to say it because I know this will go on YouTube and get me in trouble. So I'm not going to. But anyway, you know what it is. Since the event, we have learned much more about the M1 chip. I would honestly say, while the M1 chip is very, very good, the event was not. I mean, the production value was okay, but the event left everybody with more questions than answers. I feel like it resulted with everybody going, wait, what? Wait, so why does this happen? What's the clock speed of it? How does this? I don't know. I just feel like M1 chip, the event should have given us answers and instead just made us really, really confused. And yeah, now, as Spearman said, we are now seeing the actual answers as the M1 chip is finally making its way into consumers' hands, and we can actually test it and compare it to other CPUs on the market instead of just saying best-selling PC on the market or average PC laptop. Apple Silicon is here. PCs in general are here. It's like, we don't get that. Basically what I would have preferred, maybe because of this would be marketing suicide, which is why they didn't do it, but perhaps the reason they wouldn't do this, but what I would find more interesting is if they compared the M1 chip to other Macs in the lineup. If they just went out on stage and started saying the MacBook Air is now faster than the 16-inch MacBook Pro, I'd be like, oh, that's really fast. That's really good. We have that. We know that. We can test that. And if they were like, here is our 16-inch MacBook Pro series, here is Apple Silicon, and it's way up here, it'd be like, oh, dang, this stuff is good. But I guess the reason they wouldn't do that is because that would make the MacBook Pro look pretty terrible. Everyone would be like, oh, so why are you still selling that, Apple? And they'd be like, but please buy it. We know you need them ports, right? Thank you for the 100 bits, Sup. Hey, it's Sup. Where have you been? I haven't seen you in forever. You got to be more active in the Discord, man. You got to hit me up over there. Anyway, 100 bits. How dare you believe you have the right to take a break? You got to just look at Apple products for your entire life, not review or talk about them. Look at them. I did not stutter. Okay, I'll just... The rest of the day, I'll just keep staring. So, yeah, even the MacBook Air is great for video editing. I'm really happy with the chip and its performance. I'm just confused by the rollout. The execution is what I think they're botching. In my opinion, I brought this up in the video, but as I was editing it, I was like, I've left out all these arguments. Basically, what Apple did is the equivalent of developing like the most powerful, strong, also fuel efficient, you know, because this is like a miracle we're talking about here. Apple developed a really fuel efficient, extremely powerful V12 engine with the most amount of horsepower of any combustion engine we've ever seen, right? It doesn't work with the electric motors analogy, so I'm using gas for the sake of the analogy. They built a extremely powerful V12 engine that's fuel efficient and fast with amazing horsepower, and then they stuffed it into a smart car. That's what the M1 chip looks like to me. It looks like they went all balls to the wall with performance, with great speeds. Even the integrated GPU is really fast, and it's beating out things like the GTX 1050 Ti, which I used myself. That's the same GPU Wyatt has as in his PC. And now I get to tell Wyatt that my little MacBook Air with no fan is going to have better graphics than his PC, which I'm looking forward to. Not that he'll care. It's a Mac. It's not good for gaming. I know that. But still, just giving you some comparisons of how fast the M1 chip is compared to other stuff. But my question is, why did they have to release these now? Like, you could have waited until the transition was a bit cleaner. Like the MacBook Pro with M1 is very confusing. And I even saw, I think, John Morrison tweeting this morning saying that basically if you want a 13-inch MacBook Pro, don't get the M1 chip. Not because it's bad. The M1 chip is really good. It's just that most people are anticipating the 13-inch Pro is going to get updated the soonest with the M1X chip or whatever they decide to call the M1 chip. That ends up supporting 4 USB-C ports or having 2 Thunderbolt controllers, which, and honestly, we know that's in the works. We know that transition is happening. I mean, Bloomberg's reporting on it as if it's a leak, but it's honestly, it's an open secret at this point. Apple has confirmed they're making this transition to Apple Silicon, and I don't think they're just going to move everything to having 2 USB-C ports. I don't think that's the future of the Mac lineup. I'm sure that whatever the next generation Mac chip is, probably M1X, that's the most inevitable name they would go with. M1X would have 2 Thunderbolt controllers. Put that in the Mac Mini so that the Mac Mini can retain the I/O it's had for several years now. Like, it's bizarre to me that the new Mac Mini has a way faster CPU and a way better GPU with this new chip, but it has half the I/O. Like, I don't get that. Like, why did we have to release this now? I mean, you could argue that the Mac Mini has been dated and it hasn't been updated in a long time, but I would argue that that's a good reason to not update it now. Just wait a little longer. Like, I don't know how far off the M1X chip is. Maybe that influences the answer, but in which case I'm even more disappointed because now it means we're going to have this confusing, the cheaper MacBooks are faster than the more expensive MacBooks for a full year? We're talking like 12 months of this confusing lineup? Like, I'm so lost. I don't get it. Why did they have the need to update the Mac Mini now? If you look at the teardown and if you look at how the Mac Mini looks with the M1 chip in it, there's all this like empty space. I think someone brought it up in the comment section on today's YouTube video. They said there's no one at Apple to drop the Mac Mini in a fish tank to let everybody know about the air bubbles. That was a good comment. I should have favorited that. I normally don't favorite comments, but if there's one that really, really gets me, I will occasionally favorite. If you want to know how to get your comment favorited on a YouTube video, don't say Drew would never favorite this, because my nihilistic, evil side of my brain, whenever I see something like that, I'm like, yep, you're right. Now it won't. If you taunt me like that and say Drew won't like this, you're right. I will not like this. Anyway, that comment really got me. But the point is, the M1 chip literally limits the functionality of the Mac Mini as it increases the performance, which I find a little backwards. Obviously, the M1X is going to be better M2 is going to be better. All the YouTubers are correct in saying the M1 chip is the worst Apple Silicon Mac chip we're going to get, right? It's all uphill. It's all uphill, downhill. What's the term? It's all good from here. It's only going to get better than the M1 chip. So I would just rather I don't understand why it's so hard to just have a second Thunderbolt controller with the M1 chip. If they would have implemented the M1 chip into every single 13-inch MacBook Pro and it could support 4 USB-C ports and 4 USB-C ports on the Mac Mini, this would be a totally different discussion. I would not have hated it. I don't hate it. I would not have been as confused, and I think the transition would have made way more sense. I think that's what this all stems down to. The root of my whole issue with this rollout of this amazing performance, don't get me wrong, I'm still in love with it. I still can't wait to try it. My MacBook Air is out for delivery right now, and I'm going to plan on basically replacing my iMac Pro with a MacBook Air. That's literally my plan right now. And the fact that that's even possible is insanity. But my concern comes from the rollout, and if they would have just added a second Thunderbolt controller, all of this could have been avoided, and it would have been a such easier, more simple transition than what we're having now. Because now everyone's confused. I'm seeing it in the comments already. I'm saying, what do I get? Do I wait? Do I buy now? Everyone's like, what do I do? And this is why it concerns me, is because I probably live stream more than most other tech YouTubers, and I deal with a lot of, I'm also one, probably, I don't mean to brag, I don't mean to flex here, but I'm probably, out of all the YouTubers I know, one of the most active Discord members. I just engage a lot with my audience, basically. I chat with you guys a lot. I'm not trying to say I have the most accurate videos, the most well-shot videos, or the most well-edited or well-articulated. No, I kind of suck across all those things. The one thing I feel like I'm pretty good at is engaging. I chat with everybody as much as I can, whether it be Twitch or Discord, and I deal with a lot of people asking me, should I wait? Should I buy? When can I buy? When is it okay? And that's why this is my main concern with the rollout, is I'm dealing with all these responses, and I'm just like, Apple, you confused everybody. I am so confused now, and I think everybody is. If someone walks into an Apple store with a mask on and gets tested and they're good to go. If you go into an Apple store and they're like, I want a new Mac, and I'm gonna use it for video editing, and I'm gonna use it for audio editing or something like that. Like me and my friend Randy, who are both kind of somewhat in the market for a new Mac. I've had my iMac Pro for almost 3 years now. Great news is that it's still running well, so I'm in no rush to upgrade. Randy, however, has been rocking the same Mac since 2015. And I edited a couple videos on his iMac, and he's due for an upgrade. It is slow, it is laggy, and he's just, I think today is his first day. He's now going into full-time content production. He's quitting his job, and he's just going full into YouTube full-time. So because of that, he needs a new Mac, and I told him several times, I'm like, you got to upgrade, and he has no clue what to get, because for his, he uses dedicated speakers, and he has an audio mixer, and he uses a camera, and he imports footage. He needs a new Mac, and he definitely needs a 4 USB-C port machine, but he wants the best performance that's available. So now he's torn between, do I want 4 USB-C ports, or do I want Apple Silicon, which is clearly better battery life, smaller form, and he likes the lighter, smaller machine, so he would rather have a 13-inch Pro. But because they didn't switch over to the 4 USB-C port, he doesn't know what to do. He's just kind of in a pickle, really. Let me catch up with the chat here. I'm talking about engagement as I'm ignoring all of you. Silver Boy 3131, thank you for the Twitch Prime. Happy you're back, Drew. I'm replacing my 2012 Mac Mini with the M1 Mini ASAP. Can't wait for the speed increase, and the price in Canada is very reasonable. Keep your videos coming. Love your stuff. Thank you, Silver Boy. Appreciate that. Yeah, if you're coming from a 2012 Mac Mini, my God, that is a colossal upgrade. I'm happy for you. Kuzith, the owner of the Discord, said, MKBHD put it well at the end of his video. If someone's a full-on pro, then they should wait. But if you're using the Mac for something not too serious, then an upgrade would be good. Yeah, that's easy. The tough part is when you're a pro, but you've been using your machine for many, many years and you're due for an update, I would say. Which is why my fundamental suggestion to Apple at the end of the day just comes down to they should have waited. I'm not saying they had to have beat the pandemic and beat production and get the M1X chip out now. If you can't do it, you can't do it. That's fine. I'm just saying, what was the advantage to rushing this launch? What was the rush to getting this Mac Mini out now opposed to later and retaining the I/O and maybe utilizing the space inside the Mac Mini? It's still a great machine. Don't get me wrong. It's still very powerful. And I'm sure for someone coming from a 2012 Mac Mini like Silverboy, it's going to be a great upgrade. But if you're coming from a 2018 or later Mac Mini, then I don't know. It's a downgrade in that holiday sales, I guess. Yeah, they got to reach the holiday rush. Get an adapter. Adapter can only solve so many problems. There's certain things it doesn't. And with 2 USB-C ports, you really truly are limited because you've got to have power, you got to have data, you got to have as someone who does a lot of live streaming like this, just the simple fact of me using this microphone and this camera with this Mac is using 2 USB-C ports, I believe. And my iMac Pro obviously has power from the wall. If I'm trying to do this with a laptop, well, I'll show you in a little bit, probably tomorrow. So like I said, my MacBook Air is out for delivery. But where I live, I normally don't get packages until later in the evening, and I'm going to be done working by then. So I'm probably not going to unbox it for you today, but probably tomorrow I'll do a YouTube live unboxing. And I'll try it. I'll try to do some live streams and video editing on there. And I don't think the issue is going to come from the M1 chip. I think it's going to come from the I/O being really, really hard to stuff this many cables and this many ports all into one single you can only daisy chain USB-C so much. Scott is saying the worst part of my MacBook Air, which I love, is definitely the 2 ports. It's not even it's not only that there's only 2 ports, but they're on the same side. It would be a totally different situation if it was USB-C on either side, but the fact that they're right next to each other, I can't stand that. Like, I think I remember reviewing the 12-inch MacBook, and I was saying, I wish they would ditch the headphone jack for a second USB-C port. If you just had USB-C on either side, it would be a little bit better. Obviously, 4 is ideal. But yeah, that kills me. They're launching their best sellers so they can get as much data as possible for the higher-end Macs. That I get. Like the MacBook Air, I don't have any problems with how they did the MacBook Air. You know why? Because they replaced every MacBook Air. The only someone just posted this. I gotta show it. Someone just posted a meme in the Discord. It's a tweet from Linus that says Apple One Macs are faster than 98% of PC laptops, and then it says official sources stated that this is false. Relevant, right? Oh my god. Anyway, no politics. Don't bring it up. Anyway, I don't have any issue with how they transitioned the MacBook Air. They did that fine because they killed off every Intel MacBook Air and replaced it with an M1. That's what I'm in favor of. The thing I'm not in favor of is selling Intel and M1 chip variants of the same product. Like the Mac Mini, they're still selling an Intel version with 4 USB-C ports. So it's like, okay, better I/O here. And then they're also selling the M1 chip. It's like better performance, but worse I/O, which in my opinion just confuses everything. Maybe Apple's logic is like, well, we got to give the Intel a reason to exist. If we give the M1 chip 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, then no one will buy Intel machines ever. But I don't see the problem with that. Maybe Apple wants people to keep buying Intel Macs for the foreseeable future for some reason. Pixel says, this is my thinking about the transition. Apple needed to begin the transition with their most popular Macs so they can force developers to optimize apps and also test the processors with regular consumers first. Once they collect analytics and also have more optimized apps, they'll slowly transition the 4-port MacBook Pro and 16-inch. I'm okay with not adopting the MacBook Pro. I don't know, but I don't know the official numbers, but doesn't the MacBook Air sell the best? Like, I think personally you can achieve the Apple Silicon is on the best sellers by just transitioning the MacBook Air and not the Pro, because I feel like the Air sells better than all of them, doesn't it? I could be wrong on that, but I don't know. I just feel like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like they want to get the users to adopt Apple Silicon quickly so that all the developers can optimize their apps quickly because they're like, hey, a lot of people are going to be buying these things. So yeah, I get it. They want to start out with the popular ones and make their way up. Pixel is saying MacBook Air sells the best along with the 2-port MacBook Pro. I don't know. To me, it just causes too much market confusion. I never liked the 2-port MacBook Pro anyway. I would have axed that a long time ago. I always thought the deciding factor, the big feature difference between the Air and the Pro should have been the number of ports. It shouldn't be the touch bar. It shouldn't be the extra 100 nits or the P3 color, which now the Air has anyway. They already overlap a little too much, in my opinion. The only reason, hey, you think you had a point. I just came up with a counterpoint. Here it comes. The only reason the 2-port MacBook Pro sold pretty well is because it was cheap and it was better than the MacBook Air. So if you put the M1 chip in the MacBook Air, and just the Air, nothing else, screw the Mini, we'll wait on that until we can get 2 Thunderbolt controllers, and screw the 2-port MacBook Pro for good, just drop it entirely, then you don't need 2 of the same thing. If the M1 chip had better performance and better battery life, then the 2-port MacBook Pro no longer would need to exist. That's my point. Simplicity, right? Instead, we could just have all the MacBook Pros have 4 USB-C ports, and the Airs are lighter and just have 2. That would be so much more simple than being like, well, the 13-inch MacBook Pro has some of them 4 USB-C, but some have 2, and now the 2 ones are faster than the 4-port one. Like, it's so complicated to explain. Like, the 2-port MacBook Pro, in my opinion, only did well because it's pretty close in price to the Air and faster than the Air. But if the Air suddenly became faster, then the 2-port MacBook Pro didn't need to exist at all. You could have killed 2 birds with 1 stone, and now they're killing 1 bird with 2 stones, essentially. That's my new metaphor for the day. We're going to have lots of Apple Silicon metaphors, I think, in the coming weeks. This is like the V12 engine in the smart car. This is like killing 1 bird with 2 stones. It's like, it's too redundant. I think that was one of my video ideas I had on the list, but I just decided to merge it with today's video idea of just, you know what, I think Apple's teasing us with the M1 chip. They made this more complicated than it needed to be. You could have had a more simple lineup is all I'm trying to argue. Like, the lineup's really confusing. I don't think you needed to update the Mac Mini right now. For those who can benefit from it, I'm happy for you, but personally, I think it would have been smarter either to wait until you can put the M1X chip. Here's the reason I bring that up. Some of you are like, well, Drew, some of us are fine with 2 USB-C. This is how I imagine all of you guys sound, by the way. Some of us are fine with 2 USB-C ports, so it's not a big deal that it only has 2. I can live with 2. You have 4, but you have a 2018 Mac Mini, which honestly isn't that far long ago, so you can just keep using that. Anyway, main concern with the Mac Mini getting the M1 chip now is that for the past few years, we've seen Apple not update the Mac Mini very regularly. MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, sure, those things get update, I think, twice a year now? I think both 2019 and 2020, they've been updated within 6 months of each other. Every 6 months, they get another update. With the Mac Mini, it's like every other year, sometimes longer. Sometimes they go like 4 or 5 years without updating the Mini. And if they're putting the M1 chip in the Mini now, something tells me that when the M1X chip becomes available, they're not going to put it in the Mini because the Mini gets shelved and they don't think it's not a top seller. As cheap as it is, not a lot of people buy the Mac Mini. So it's just going to sit on the store, not get updated. And we're all going to be arguing about why can't they update the Mac Mini? Because I've been, admiring the Mac store, the Mac store for the past 10 years. And it's always been like the Mac Mini's dated. The Mac Mini's dated. They update it occasionally, but then they forget about it. And I'm worried that the M1 chip in the Mac Mini is just going to get forgotten about, and it's just going to be stuck with USB-C ports for a long time. Anyway, someone donated here. 100 bits. Do you think virtual reality technology would become a reality? 93 degrees. Would virtual reality technology become a reality? Yeah, I mean, it is a reality. It's just a virtual one. So that technically means it's real? I don't know. Why does the M1 chip go in the Mac Mini? The chip is designed for ultralights and efficiency. Why not put a more powerful chip in the Mini? That's exactly, Yolo Piop and I actually agree on something. That's how you know Apple screwed up. Most of the time we disagree, I know, but Yolo and I are actually agreeing on the fact that you built this chip to double the battery life of MacBooks, and now you're putting it in a desktop. Like, never before have I ever seen Apple choose one processor to go across so many different devices. You have fanless design, fan design, desktop, laptop. Like, there's such a long stretch. To me, the M1 chip in the Mac Mini feels like a cop-out. It feels like it's put something else in there. And then they're going to forget about it in 2 years, and it still won't have the M1X or the M2 chip. Yes, from the teardown I saw, there seems to be quite a bit of wasted space in the Mac Mini. Like, it does not need to be as big as it is. It has a bunch of air just inside of it that isn't being utilized. And the way I think about it is you could go one of two ways. For one, you could just shrink the design to not require all that empty space and maybe make something even smaller, maybe something like the size of an Apple TV, but it has the M1 chip and it has, I'm even okay, honestly, I wouldn't be that upset by this. Maybe some of you would, but I wouldn't mind if they ditched the USB-A ports on the Mac Mini. Some of you probably use them, but I mean, if we're comparing it to the MacBooks, those don't have USB-A. Those don't have HDMI. Those just have USB-C, and that's it, and the headphone jack. So what if they made like a Apple TV-sized Mac that just had 2 or 4 USB-C ports on the back and a headphone jack and power? Maybe if you've got room, Ethernet, I guess. Apple TVs even have Ethernet, so perhaps do that. But just make it more compact and more easy to just kind of, you know how some of those Apple TVs have mounts that let you put them on the back of monitors? So just make a more compact Mac Mini, or if you don't want to go smaller, keep the same size, but wait until you can put in a more powerful chip that maybe could utilize a larger fan or be overclocked to the point where cooling it off makes a big difference. Because right now, I'm looking at the speed test. I've been watching a lot of YouTubers review the M1 chip, and it seems that between the Air, the Mini, and the Pro, performance is pretty dang close. It's not like it's miles ahead on the Pro and the Mini because they have a fan and the Air is just really, really slow. It's like, I think in the Final Cut exports I was looking at, it was like a difference of 12 seconds. Like the Mac Mini exported 12 seconds faster than the Air. So I feel like the fan doesn't really make that big a difference. The fan is almost like placebo. It's to make you think that the computer is working harder because the fan's not cranked up all the way. And I've seen a lot of people say that in their testing, the export times, even when they're doing high-intensive tasks, the fan doesn't rev up very much. Probably because the M1 chip is so efficient, it doesn't really need a fan. As we know with the Air, their best seller, you can get quite a bit of performance without the fan operating. So no wonder no one's hearing it in the Mac Mini and the MacBook Pro, because it runs fine. You don't really need that much cooling anyway. The Air is actually taller and with a smaller battery life. I don't think it's taller, no, but the 100 bits from 93 degrees asks, between Samsung and Apple, which would you pick? What would Drew pick between Samsung and Apple? That's a tough one. We'll probably have to save that for the end. Probably Samsung, right? Why would anyone choose the M1 Pro if you can get a cheaper M1 MacBook? Well, the Pro has a touch bar. Some people love it. Some people hate it. So I can kind of get that. I would say there's a bigger difference between the MacBook Air and the M1 MacBook Pro than there is the 12 and 12 Pro. Touch bar is kind of a big deal. I mean, that's a whole extra display that you interact with pretty regularly. I don't think the telephoto and LiDAR are that big a deal. So we've been down that road. You guys know my opinions on the 12 Pro. I don't think anybody should get it. And many of you disagree, and that's fine. The point is, like, if you're on the fence, if you're unsure, and you're asking for my opinion, then you should get the 12. If you're not on the fence, you don't need my opinion. That's kind of where I stand on the subject, is like, if you're watching a YouTube video asking for advice, then that means you probably don't need the 12 Pro. But if you're decided in your ways and it's not a debate for you, you absolutely need the telephoto and LiDAR, you don't need my advice. Anyway, I could still see the argument as to why the Air is lighter for one. The Pro has a longer battery. You get a few hours longer battery life out of the Pro compared to the Air. You do get that fan, but now I'm starting to say that's not that big a deal. Doesn't really make that big of a difference. Oh, that's true. The MacBook Pro does have better microphones. They give it the studio quality mics. It's a slightly brighter display, though I don't think that's going to make a big difference. 100 bits from 93 degrees scandal, if you know about it, where people found out that each iOS update makes the phone slower. Yeah, I've done like a million videos on it. I appreciate the donation, but it's kind of a dead horse at this point. The skinny man is here. Thank you for 1 month tier 1 sub. Appreciate that. Hey, that costs money. What are you doing? Don't do that. Well, thank you. The skinny man is not here, but I like your name. Appreciate it. Basically, I don't think Apple was trying to make the processor slower just because they wanted you to upgrade. The reason they were making them slower was because the battery was getting damaged long term and causing unexpected shutdowns. And I actually remember that happening. There was all these people complaining that their iPhone, after a certain number of years, was getting old. And after a certain amount of time, it was getting to the point where the phone would die before it reached 0%. So the way they combated that was to slow down the processor a bit so that the battery would last longer. But I think the reason they got in trouble legally was because they weren't telling people that, and they were just telling people to buy a new iPhone. So the marketing aspect of it was flawed, and they've since changed their direction on that. But what they were actually doing, in my opinion, based on what I was reading and the evidence I've seen put out, I don't think that they were, yeah, Scott can attest. It was an issue on a 6S. It would die at like 30%. Yeah, so Apple decided we should prioritize battery life instead of insane clock speeds because most people are not appreciating the insane clock speeds. So we're going to slow down the CPU to preserve the battery. The problem was they just weren't disclosing that because I don't think Apple even likes admitting things that fall under the laws of physics. They didn't want to say your battery health is deteriorating. They just wanted to say, keep using your iPhone and it'll keep working. In my opinion, they did more to let iPhones last way longer than Android companies do. Android companies just give up after 2 or 3 years and then let the battery start dying on you at 20 or 10%. Apple does a lot more work to make sure the iPhone lasts a long time, but some of that work ended up making people think Apple just wanted you to buy the latest iPhone, which they do. No denying that. They are a company. Of course, they want you to buy the latest iPhone. But anyway, 100 bits again. I'm new here, so what do you usually talk about? Well, today we're talking mostly about the new M1 chip going into the Apple Macs and why the chip itself is great, but the rollout is confusing. I would love to get Woz on the podcast. Sorry, I just don't know how to do that. I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen, especially given in the last podcast, they couldn't even get me on it. We can't even get me on the podcast. So how do you want me to get Woz on there? Anyway, it would be stupid to get rid of the touch bar. That would be getting rid of functionality for no reason. Just touch bar is a touchy subject to a certain extent. Like, I know a lot of people that love the touch bar, including myself. I've often said I would buy a Magic Keyboard with a touch bar on it. I would appreciate that. Mainly because I think just having a touch panel to change volume and brightness is so much more elegant and easier than having to press a button. Having to do the... I don't like doing that as easy as just tap and swipe. I find that a lot more seamless. And I don't really use a lot of the touch bar features of like Final Cut where the apps change and utilize the touch bar, but I do use predictive text. I like that. When I'm on iMessage and it gives you the predictive text that you can just reach up and type. It's better for typos. It's easier when you're on a keyboard and the little pop-up on macOS wants you to hit cancel or OK. And I can just tap the keyboard instead of having to reach for the mouse and having to move the mouse over or having to hit enter. Usually my fingers are closer to the letters, so I can just hit up and hit OK. Scrubbing thing. The picture-in-picture button. That was a huge thing that, in my opinion, made the touch bar worth it, is when you're watching YouTube video, you could just hit one button and it jumps into picture-in-picture. I was like, thank you. So there's a lot of things I like about the touch bar. It's worked reliably for me whenever I tried it. But I've also seen people say they hate it and they prefer the keys and they prefer buttons and they don't like the touch bar. And some people I've seen say it's unreliable and it crashes on them or freezes on them. I've never had that, but I completely admit there are some people it has happened to. So for that reason, I get why having both is good, and considering it a pro feature makes sense. I like that differentiating factor. Give the pros the touch bar, give the air function keys. That way everybody has something. Both are pretty fast now with the M1 chip. So I'm fine with that. I don't think they should ditch the touch bar. And I also don't think they should bring the touch bar to everything. I think it's good to have an option for both. Honestly, with how complicated the MacBook lineup is right now, I wouldn't mind if they made a 16-inch MacBook Pro that was cheaper with function keys. And I think it would probably sell pretty well, and Apple knows that. Countable says the touch bar is objectively better than function keys. I don't know if we can say objective because a lot of it does come down to personal preference, but I agree with I agree to the extent that I prefer them. 100 bits again. Do you know people that are overconscious and want to be off the grid? I know several people who are. Yeah, I'm not really in that department because just where I live basically, and I'm not too concerned about going completely off grid. But yes, I do know people like that. To answer your question, Panayer asks Drew, how do you think Apple's discrete GPUs will be? I'm curious it will stack up against NVIDIA and AMD. My guess is Apple will crush the competition, but of course it'll have great performance, but not be upgradable or very accessible to everybody else. So you're not going to be able to buy this GPU and put it in your Hackintosh or upgrade your Mac Pro with a new discrete GPU. It's going to be very small and soldered into the MacBooks and irremovable, but very powerful, very power efficient. I think it'll crush the competition. But it'll just be difficult to get a direct, no pun intended, apples to apples comparison because you're going to have them only in MacBooks and you won't be able to put them in anything else. So you're going to get a lot of Mac OS optimization that you won't be able to get with Windows using third-party GPUs. So yeah, I think this is a very interesting turn for the Mac lineup as a whole. I think that this is probably going to be one of the Mac's biggest advantages now. Like for the longest time, it's always been said, you can build your own PC with better specs than a Mac. And some people even suggest, you can build your own Hackintosh. And if you're willing to fuss around with drivers and dealing with your computer not working every time there's a major Mac OS update, if you're willing to tinker, you can get a much more powerful Mac that you build yourself instead of just buying it straight from Apple. Whereas I think Apple Silicon is going to change things where it's like, okay, now Apple is building these M1 processors with integrated GPUs that beat out everything in its class by far. In fact, it beats out a lot of things outside of its class because now we have the M1 chip outperforming computers that cost more than twice as much. $1,000 MacBook Air in certain tasks is faster than a $3,000 or $4,000 MacBook Pro 16-inch. That's crazy. So imagine these discrete GPUs and Apple's dedicated GPUs coming to the rest of the lineup. I think they'll be better than everybody else, and you'll only be able to get them in the package of an Apple MacBook. So it's going to for the longest time, the biggest advantage Macs had was Mac OS, and Hackintosh was kind of your sidestep around that. It was like, well, you could technically get Mac OS on a PC. It's just a lot of work and it's a lot of troubleshooting. I've done it myself. It is not fun, but it can be done. But now I think with Apple Silicon, it's going to start to become the biggest advantage of like, if you want the best performance out of like either writing code, audio engineering, video engineering, video editing, that kind of thing. Probably everything that's high intensive for a computer except gaming. I don't think gaming's going to change very much with Apple Silicon. I don't think it'll get much worse, but I don't expect it to get much better either, just because it requires... The biggest problem is just devs not wanting to optimize their games for the Mac because it's not a very large user base of gamers. So I get why developers don't do that. it is a game changer for sure, and it's going to give Apple a whole new advantage over the competition. But it won't be very upgradable, that's for sure. And you're going to have to say goodbye to things like Boot Camp and being able to Hackintosh and put Mac OS onto PCs or run Windows 10 off your Mac. All that kind of stuff's going to kind of fall away. But do you think Apple will sell their M1 chips for other brands? I don't, Gaming 56. They haven't done that. Apple's been making their own silicon for a long time. They've never sold them out, so I don't think they're going to. But 100 bits between U.S. companies and Japanese companies, which tech would you think is superior? Oh, man, that's impossible to answer. I mean, there's all kinds of different tech both countries are into. If we're talking like, I don't know, electric cars or smartphones, maybe the U.S., but if we're talking robotics and there's a bunch of tech Japan is good at. It doesn't come to on the top of my head because I've not been there and I don't know that market very well. But I'm sure there's a bunch of Japanese technologies that are superior, but I don't know of them at the top of my head. I'm sure it just depends on the tech. Could you explain to me, a layman, what processor chips are and what are RAM? Why are these things important? I'm probably not going to be able to answer that very well. I'm probably going to take 30 minutes to try to explain to you what those are. I appreciate the donation, but I would recommend Google. Just look it up for more strict, simplified, and easy definitions, because I think RAM stands for random access memory. Processors are just mini computers that calculate things. I don't know. It's not an easy, simple solution that you're going to get from me. Maybe Google will. The rail system like Japan. Yeah, true. Let's see. Parallels is under testing for M1, so you can still run Windows 10 even if it's not booting natively. Yeah, I know you can. I just know there's a lot of people that don't want to run in a virtual machine. They don't want an emulation of Windows 10. They just want it to run natively. And I'm just here to tell you it's probably not going to happen. There might be some very complicated way to get it happen, but I think Apple's going to lock it out and just say, nope, sorry, M1 chip is only going to run Mac OS now. No, I don't think. So Rice Sandwich said, same way we're seeing iMessage outside the Apple ecosystem. Are we, though? Is there a way to get iMessage outside of the ecosystem? Because I haven't seen that. Only Apple product I'm dreaming of, Apple M1 potato chips. Guess it's lunchtime. Yeah, it is. Intel is the potato chip now, I think. I know Windows has been ported to ARM. I just don't know if Apple's going to continue supporting Boot Camp. I know that there are technically ways to get Linux and Windows onto ARM computers. It may be theoretically possible, but I could see Apple saying, no more Boot Camp. We're not going to do Boot Camp anymore. I could see them doing that. You can get iMessage outside the ecosystem, but you need an iMac or a MacBook to run it. Yeah, that's not outside the that's cheating. That's not what I meant. Yeah, the M1 transition seems to be going much smoother than the Surface Pro X. That's for sure. It definitely helps that Apple actually knows. They actually know how to build silicon, that kind of thing. Linux is well supported on ARM. Windows not so much. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be. I'm not saying that you won't be able to boot into Linux or Windows because they don't run on ARM. I know they do, but I'm just saying I could see Apple putting up another wall there and saying, sorry, only Mac OS now. That's it. And honestly, Boot Camp, I don't mind saying goodbye to. It's not really that big a deal because Boot Camp doesn't run very great anyway when I've tried it. I'm sure there's certain people that utilize it a lot. They've been in my Discord several times to tell me, like, Apple Silicon sucks. I need Boot Camp. I want Windows, and I want to be able to play PC games on the Mac. I get that there's that market and concern, and they don't want to emulate. They don't want a virtual machine. They want it to run natively. But honestly, there's a lot of driver inconsistencies when you do Boot Camp on the Mac anyway. It doesn't run very well. You can't turbo boost, and it's just you run into a whole suite of issues when you start trying to put Windows, even to run natively on a Mac, to the point that I don't think it's going to be the end of the world to lose Boot Camp. I don't think it's a big deal. To most Mac users, there's going to be a subset that'll be upset. But if you really, really want Boot Camp, but you still want, you want your PC, you want your Mac to play PC games, then I guess buy up your Intel Macs now because they're about to go away. King Wing says, I use Boot Camp, but as long as I can use Virtual Machine, I'll be fine. Yeah, you can still do parallels. So if you're not doing anything very power intensive on Windows, I think you'll still be fine. But let's see. As a web developer, I'm concerned about some command line tools like Homebrew, NVM, RVM, etc. Also, are we going to get Chromium for Apple Silicon? You need it for VS Code and other tools. Man, I really wish I knew what any of that meant, but I understand the concerns. I get it as a web developer, but I really don't know. I don't have answers for you. I'm sorry. You should test out the Surface Pro X versus the MacBook Pro and see which one got better. The MacBook does. I don't need to test it to tell you that. I can confidently tell you the M1 chip is faster. Much, much faster than whatever crap they were putting in the Surface Pro X. Let's see. Do you think Linux is the future? People keep telling me it's so good and you can control every little part of the OS and no weird default bloatware applications. No, the best-selling stuff is not, Android has tons of bloatware and that's the most popular mobile OS. So no, just because you can customize things doesn't mean it's the future. It'll be a piece of the greater market. But Aiden, thank you for the bits. Let's see. I bought an M1 MacBook Pro to compare to the 16-inch I bought to run SolidWorks CAD on Windows. I noticed that Parallels is more stable, but it is slower than Boot Camp. I'm still in the return window for Amazon, so I'm not sure what I'm going to end up keeping. Interesting. That'll be an interesting test to see if M1 can make up for the loss in translation. Yeah, let us know what you do at the end. That'll be interesting. Yeah, average users like my dad want a simple OS like macOS. Yeah, I think most people do. Most of I've never seen someone describe the native apps on macOS as bloatware, personally. I think people like the preloaded apps for the most part on Mac. There's a few that we don't need, but for the most part, iMessage and Safari and a lot of people like Final Cut. The App Store has good apps that run well on the Mac. I'm just looking at the apps on my Mac now. Like, what else is there? I guess some of the iPad apps they've ported over people don't like as much, but anyway, Mail needs a rewrite. I haven't used Mail on the Mac, to be honest with you. I actually use the Stocks app on my Mac quite a bit, to be honest. I like it. I know it's not probably super well optimized compared to the iPad, but I don't know. It looks clean, and it doesn't require ads. There's so many alternatives to the default apps, but all the developers want money for them, or they're going to put ads in them or pop-ups to say subscribe to this, because obviously they're trying to make a living. So I kind of like having just the first party default thing to tap into. I was talking to someone about this. The entire reason that iOS, macOS, etc. are the most popular is the same reason that AirPods are the most popular. They're not the best when it comes to power or efficiency. They're the simplest, and simplicity sells. The AirPods aren't the best sounding headphones, but they are the simplest, and simplicity sells. I agree with the simplicity sells, but in this case, macOS and Apple Silicon is going to be the most powerful and most power efficient. If not powerful, definitely efficient then, because I cannot find me another laptop on the market with that kind of performance that gets you 16 to 20 hours of battery life. Battery life on the Mac is going to, it's already crushing the competition, and it's going to crush it even harder with the M1 chip. And honestly, seeing what Apple was capable of doing with the M1 chip, just think about the performance we're going to see when the Mac Pro transitions. Holy crap, we're approaching, supercomputer territory. If this is what they can do with $700 towers, Mac Mini is only $700 and it can rock the M1 chip. Then imagine what a $6,000 or $10,000 Mac tower could be capable of with Apple Silicon. I would say it is the most powerful and the most power efficient, and it's the most simple. So they win all three check boxes here. They kind of get to check everything. The only checkbox they don't get to check is, of course, probably app support, because there's a lot of people who want to play games, and Mac OS is not going to get the most game support, and there's going to be programs that people want to use that doesn't get optimized for Apple Silicon. So I get it. But yeah, the Mac Pro, I think, is going to, it's not going to even be comparable. The CPU and GPU performance of the Mac Pro is going to be on a whole new level of computational power that we've never even seen before. Like in consumer grade products, at least, like it may be comparable to like server farms or computers that are all chained and linked together. But yeah, there's not going to be Intel or AMD processor equivalents to whatever they're cooking up for the Mac Pro. That's going to be insane. Yeah, the M1 has the fastest individual single core performance of pretty much any Intel processor ever clocked. And that's in a laptop. Ugh, and without a fan. My God. With the M1 Max remaining at the same price without a redesign, would they get a price increase when they eventually get a redesign? It's possible. There's rumors that they're working on mini LED MacBooks for next year. So those, I could see them getting more expensive since they will have giant jumps in the display game. Thinking about computers physically chained together makes me laugh. Mike is a simple man. Thoughts on iOS/iPad apps running on the Mac? Why is that certain apps like Instagram don't seem to work? I never got that. I don't understand the appeal to that. Ever since they announced that, they were like, you can now run iPhone and iPad apps on the Mac. I was like, well, that's not going to work very well. I have never had much of the desire to get a Mac app, to get an iPhone app and put it on my Mac. Most of the time because iPhone apps are designed for touch, and they're designed for you to mainly use with one or two fingers, usually your thumb. And I'm not going to use my Mac with just my thumb. I'm going to be using keyboard and mouse. So I don't know. I know that developer-wise, it's going to be pretty easy to optimize it. So you can be like, hey, technically it's running on the Mac, but I don't think that means it instantly runs very well. And the UI is going to be fairly clunky, I'm sure. So I never got too excited by that announcement. I was like, okay, iPad apps on the Mac. You probably want to tinker them a little bit to make sure they're more keyboard and mouse friendly. I know that shout out to Max Tech was all talking about how the fact that game devs have to make their games run on iOS and iPad OS, and now that iPad and iPhone apps can now run on the Mac, this is going to be a big game changer for the Mac. I just don't. He could be right. I don't say he's 100% wrong on that, but personally, I just don't see developers as easy as Apple may make it. They may make Metal support for Macs much easier, and they may come to the developers with a silver platter and say, please optimize your games for the Mac. It's so simple, and you got to make iOS and iPad OS games anyway. Just port them over to the Mac while you're at it. I still think that the third-party game devs, especially the big ones, that just bringing the huge iOS app store to the Mac, I don't think really makes the Mac a gaming machine. It's like, okay, I can play phone games on a desktop. Cool, but I don't think that changes very much. But what I was trying to answer in my videos that Max responded to was basically that, there's a lot of people who think, there's a lot of people that think Apple Silicon is going to turn Macs into gaming PC replacements that you'll be able to play all the latest, Steam games and Epic, definitely not Epic now, but, just popular PC games are now going to run on the Mac and they're going to run great and you don't need a gaming PC anymore. And I was like, no, that's not what's going to happen. You might get some phone games on the Mac, but for the most part, the main issue with why Macs are not great at gaming is because developers don't want to optimize for them because there's not much incentive to. There's not a lot of people on Mac in the first place, and also because Microsoft owns Xbox and Windows, it's very easy to optimize a game for two platforms when you support DirectX and that kind of thing. Like when you build a game for PC, it's very easy to at the same time build a game for the Xbox. Two huge gaming platforms. So that's where most of their attention is going to go. If they want to spend time to optimize their game for the Mac, doesn't matter how quick or how easy it is, it's not going to be a huge demographic. And when there's updates and when there's bug fixes, you have to continuously provide updates and support to the Mac, which is going to cost them money and time. and it's not a huge market, so they're just not going to optimize for it. That's how I think it's going to go, and I think Snazzy Labs agrees with me based on what he's said on Twitter. I haven't seen him respond directly to Max Tech, but yeah, I personally just don't see game devs budging based on Apple making it easier to write games for the Mac. I don't think that's going to change it. Apple, you can now run all types of games on Apple Silicon Macs. Actual uses. Ah, yes, Minecraft Pocket Edition. Yeah, that's pretty much what's going to happen. We're going to get like Minecraft Pocket Edition on the Mac and, Crossy Roads. It's like, hey, you can play Angry Birds and all these great arcade originals. It's like, it doesn't make it the reason I made a video called Why It Doesn't Change Gaming on the Mac is because I've always said, Macs can game. They're just not built for it. It's kind of like saying a car can't go in reverse. It's like, yeah, a car can go backwards. Just it's not really built for that. The Mac can play some games, but if you're wondering if it's going to be better than a console or better than a gaming PC at it, no, it's definitely not built for that. Macs are built more around, I would say, productivity and workflow and being heavily and optimized, embedded into the Apple ecosystem. So you can use it with your phone and your iPad really seamlessly, and you get long-term support out of it. You get great battery life, which you will not get with gaming PC laptops. Gaming laptops have like 30-minute to 1 hour battery lives, whereas Apple's the type of company to be like, okay, let's try to get this to last all day. Very different markets. Midnight Studios asked, do you think all 2021 iPhones will have 120 hertz? Also, isn't it annoying that people are already jumping to iPhone 13 instead of 12S? Well, we always get the naming wrong. Most of the time, 12 was the first iPhone in a while we got. Well, I guess we were pretty accurate with the 11 as well. I think it'll be 12S. I could be wrong. They might jump straight to 13, but I don't find it annoying because people arguing that it'll be 13 next year have good points. I just think they're wrong. I don't think the whole lineup will be 120 hertz. No, I think that Apple knows that's a very tech community thing. That's a very pro-oriented thing that only certain people notice. I don't think average consumers would notice 120 hertz. So it'll probably be a pro feature, and the normal 12S and 12S mini will be 60 hertz. They could give it 90, but I don't see Apple doing that. I don't see them doing the whole, 90 is a little bit better, but 120 is a bit, I don't see them doing that. I think, especially with the Mini, which I guess I haven't talked much about. I've been using it as this is my daily. 12 Pro Max is still in the box. Not touching it, not looking at it because I want to fully engross myself in the Mini, and I'm using this a lot. And battery life is pretty dang bad. Sorry. Gotta admit, I like the Mini. I like the form factor. I love the cameras. I love the display. A lot of this phone is great. I would arguably say everything about this phone is great, except the battery life, which is, I hate to say it, a little worse than I thought it was going to be. I knew it would be worse than the Max. Of course, every Max phone is probably going to have a better battery life than the Mini, just from physical size, but this is not ready for a 120 hertz display. They gotta, 5G's been off this whole time. Literally, I unboxed it, I set it up, 5G turned off. That was the first thing I did. There's no 5G turned on at all with this phone. It's LTE only. No 5G has been accessed during the entire life of this phone. It has not used 5G once, and I made sure of it. I'll show you. Cellular, yeah. This is, well, it's hard to see. It's all, this display is too bright. LTE is checked. I did not leave 5G on for a split second. That was the first thing I changed when I turned it off. So it's been LTE this whole time, and yet battery life has been pretty disappointing for me. And honestly, it has me worried a little bit about using this as my daily for the rest of the year. So I have not reached a conclusion on 12 Mini versus 12 Pro Max. I've been testing the Mini first because that's what won the poll, but I'm still going to try out the Pro Max after a week or two of testing this thing, and then I'll give you my opinions on it. But Yeah, I would not put a 90 hertz display or a 120 hertz display on this thing, because it needs a bigger battery or it needs some new power efficiency, because I'm sure the A14 chip is very efficient, but even that, sometimes you can't beat physics, and the battery in this is just, it's been too small for me. Yeah, not good. Sad to say. I wanted to recommend this to everyone and just say the 12 mini is the best, but after my battery experience, I can't objectively say that. It's to give you a sneak peek. I mean, I've used it since the day I unboxed it, which was Friday, so I used it Saturday through today. And it's actually been doing really good today because I'm at home. So it's already influenced my opinion on it because of how I've used it on the drive back and on my trip and using it on like a busy day. But now I'm having the internal debate with myself about whether or not it can fit my lifestyle. I'm sure it can fit a lot of people's lifestyles, but can it fit my personal lifestyle, or do I need something with longer battery? Not sure. Not sure at this point. Honestly, sitting at my desk working from home is a lot of my lifestyle, and I have a wireless charger right here. It doesn't work with the Pixel stand. I don't know if you guys saw that, but the 12 mini is so small, it actually does not work with a lot of wireless chargers. I heard Randy on the podcast say his Tesla wireless charger doesn't align with the mini. That's a problem. And the Pixel stand doesn't work either. I had to pull out another wireless charger. Luckily, the Witty one, this is the other wireless charger I had. It's probably my first or second favorite. It's very simple. It's very clean and elegant. It's just a big circle, but it's a vertical. It stands upright, which I like. And this charges the 12 mini. So I still have a charger at my desk, so I probably can get by with a weak screen on time. But when I was using it on my vacation and for just hanging out and taking pictures and using it for GPS navigation, it was like 3.5 to 4 hours of screen on time. And it was done. It was pretty much conked out after 3.5 to 4 hours SOT, which is not great. Honestly, I'm used to like 8 or 9 with my with my 11 Pro Max. I could easily get 8 or 9, depending on what I was doing. Sometimes 10 hours of screen on time. And I'm sure with the 12 Pro Max, it's going to be about the same, probably 8 to 9 hours of screen on time, depending on what you're doing. But this is barely reaching 4 for me, which is quite a downgrade. It's like less than half the battery, I would say. I would just be, I wasn't even using it that much on the trip. It wasn't like I was playing games for hours and hours. I was just kind of like lounging around the condo and mainly using my iPad for stuff, and then occasionally picking up my phone and checking finance apps. You know, I don't have social media on here. I don't have any work apps on here. It's just YouTube, Safari, and some banking apps. And even that, I was ending the day and I was like, really? It's already to 20%? Already to 10%? So I had to plug in my phone for GPS navigation. Normally I don't have to. Normally I just, leave the house at 100%, put it in the little car mount and plug in the directions, and I'm on my way. On this trip, though, it was like 4 or 5 hours into the drive and it was at 10%. I had to plug it in. I was like, oh, dang, the battery's almost gone, and we've got a long way to go. So I don't know, but I got to get going, guys. Appreciate all of the bits, all of the I've had dark mode too. I appreciate all of the Twitch primes. I try my best to read them all off. Appreciate the bits, and got some more work to get done today, but I will see you with the Apple MacBook Air with M1 Silicon tomorrow, probably live on YouTube. And probably early in the morning, since the package will get here today. Anyway, thank you all. Have a great day. Bye-bye.